Dealings with the Dead, number 37. Dr. Johnson said if an atheist came into his house, he would lock up his spoons. I've always distrusted a sexton who did not cherish a sentiment of profound and cordial affection for his bell. It did my heart good when a boy, to mark the proud satisfaction with which Lutton, the sexton of the Old Brick, used to ring for fire. I have no confidence in a fellow who can toll his bell for a funeral and listen to its deep and solemn vibrations without a gentle subduing of the spirit. I never had a great affection for Claflin, the sexton of Berry Street Church, but I always respected the deep feeling of indignation he manifested if anybody meddled with his bell rope. It's important to realize that people have different musical tastes, and the effect of a musical instrument is not as smooth as that of the voice, particularly when loud, so not everybody meshes with things so well. Bells were treated more honorably in the olden time, and ringing was an art, an accomplishment then. Holden tells us some fine stories of the societies of ringers. In his youth, Sir Matthew Hale was a member of one of those societies. In 1687, Nell Gwyn, and it may be lawful to take the devil's water, as Dr. Worcester said, to turn the Lord's mill. Nell Gwyn left the ringers of the church bells in St. Martin's in the Fields, where there is a peal of 12, a sum of money for a weekly entertainment. I never shall get the chime of the North Church bells out of my ears. I hope I never shall. More than 100 years ago, my mother used to open the window of a Christmas Eve that we may hear their music. And some people say that the musical instruments are the devil's version of rituals and prayers. In the olden times, bells were baptized, rantized, I presume, and were posies on their collars. They were first cast in England in the reign of Edmund I, and the first tunnable set, or peal, for Croyland Abbey was cast in 960 of the Common Era. Weaver tells us in his funeral monuments that in 1501 the bells of the priory of Little Dunmow in Essex were baptized by the names of St. Michael, St. John, Virgin Mary, and so on. As late as 1816, the great bell of Notre Dame in Paris was baptized by the name of the Duke of Angoulême. Bells were supposed to be invested with extraordinary powers. They were employed not only to call the congregation together, to give notice of conflagrations, civil commotions, and the approach of an enemy, and to ring forth the merry holiday peal, but to quell tempests, pacify the restless dead, and arrest the very lightning. Bells often bore inscriptions like these: Laudo Deum verum plebem vaco, conjugo alarum defunctos chloro, pestem fugo fusa decora, funero plago, fulgura, frango, sabata, pango, excito, lentos, dissipo, ventos, paco, iruntas. The passing bell was the bell which announced to the people according to Babylon, that the spirit was taking its flight or passing away and demanding their prayers. Bells were also used to frighten away evil spirits that were supposed to be on the watch for their customers. The learned Durandus affirms that all sorts of devils have a terror of bells. This, of course, can only be true of bells that have been received into the flock that is baptized. Such was the popish belief, and that the very devil himself cared not a fig for an unbaptized bell. Dr. Ward, in his London Legend, saith, "It is said that the evil spirits that bend in the reign of the air doubt much when they hear the bells ringing. And this is the cause why the bells been ringing when it thundereth, and when great tempests and outrages of weather happen, to the end that the fiends and the wicked spirits should be abashed and flee, and cease of the moving of tempests." Not the common spelling of English, so, you know. I have a couple bells that have inscriptions on them. I think it's just Om, Whom, something like that. Odmanipagmehum, maybe. One I put myself, the other, that's what it came with. It's tuned to delta frequency. But a lot of this bell ringing is sort of, okay, spirits, you get yours, and by this act, and therefore don't take too much from me, right? This should be enough for you. And that's the whole serving God and mammon thing, right? Dividing your worship between conflicting sides is, and, that thing in the verse, that ringing the bell when the fire happens, of course, in this day and age, we could probably think of Beavis and Butthead, fire, 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 all that stuff. Compared with the big bells of the earth, ours, the very largest, are cowbells at best. The great bell of St. Paul's weighs 8,400 pounds, a small affair. Great Tom of Lincoln, 9,894. Great Tom of Oxford, 17,000. This is precisely the weight of the bell of the Palazzo at Florence, St. Peter's at Rome, 18,607. The great bell at Erfurt, 28,224. St. Joanne's bell at Moscow, 127,836 pounds. The bell of the Kremlin, 443,772 pounds. The last is a marvel of the travelers, and its metal, at a low estimate, is valued at 66,565 euros. That sounds like something you can add a common 3 zeros to nowadays, right? During the fusion of this bell, considerable quantities of gold and silver were cast in, the pious contribution of the people. This enormous mass has never been suspended. And also the Tibetans have a multi-metal tradition in making their bells. So even though a couple of my homemade bells sort of sounds the same, it kind of doesn't. But most people wouldn't notice the difference. There was a bell, Parvis Componer Magna, a very little bell indeed, a perfect tintinnabulum. It made a most ridiculous noise. An account of this bell may be found in a pamphlet entitled Historical Notices and so on. of the New North Religious Society in the town of Boston, 1822. It weighed, says the writer, between 300 and 400. 12 or 1300 such bells, therefore, would just about counterpoise the bell of the Kremlin. Its tone, says the writer, was unpleasant. The preposterous clatter of this bell was nevertheless the gathering cry of the worshippers at the New North Church for the term of 83 years, from 1719 to 1802, when it was purchased by the town of Charlton in the city of Worcester, in the county of Worcester, probably to frighten the evil spirits in the shape of wolves and foxes abounding there. Well, one of the main things that keeps some of the animals away from the cities and towns and stuff is the noise, that would likely to doubt mock when this bell was been ringing. Not to look a gift horse in the mouth is a proverb. Not to criticize the tone of a gift bell may be another. This bell, which a stout Southdown weather might almost have carried off, was the gift of Mr. John Frizzell, a merchant of Boston, to the New North Church on the island of North Boston, as all that portion of the town was then called, lying north of Mill Creek, on the principle which gave the title of Bell the Cat to the famous Archibald Frizzell, should have borne the name of Bell the Church. Let it pass. Frizzell and his little bell are both translated. The tongue of the former is still, that of the latter still waggeth. I believe in the town of Charlton. The authenticity of the statements in the pamphlet to which I have referred admits not of a doubt. The name of its highly respectable author, though not upon the title page, appears in the certificate of copyright, and in the range of my limited reading, I have met with nothing more curious and grotesque than his account of the installation of the Reverend Peter Thatcher over the New North Church, January 27th, 1720, upon no less respectable evidence. I would have believed that our amiable ancestors could have acted so much like evil spirits upon such an occasion. I have not elbow room for the farce entire. One or two touches must suffice. After agreeing upon a mode of choosing a colleague for the Reverend Mr. Webb and pitching upon Mr. Thatcher, a quarrel arose among the people. The council met on the day of installation at the house of the Reverend Mr. Webb, at the corner of North Bennett and Salem Streets. The aggrieved assembled at the house of Thomas Lee in Bennett Street next to the Universal Meeting House. A knowledge of these points is necessary for a correct understanding of the subsequent strategy. If the council attempted to go to the New North Church through the street in the usual way, they must necessarily pass Lee's house. The aggrieved waited on the council by a committee, requesting them not to proceed with the installment of Mr. Thatcher, and assuring them that if they persisted, force would be used to prevent their occupation of the church. Instead, therefore, of proceeding through the street, the Reverend Mr. Webb led the council by his back gate through the Love Lane and a little alley leading to the meeting house, and thus got possession of the pulpit. Thus, by a knowledge of byways so important in the Petite Guerre, the worthy clergyman outwitted the malcontents, a mob to whom an installation in such sort was highly acceptable, had already gathered. The party at Lee's house, being apprised of the ruse, and perceiving they were in danger of the council, flew to the rescue. They rushed into the church, vociferously forbade the proceedings, and were indecent, says the writer, almost beyond credibility. However incredible, continues the narrator, it is a fact that some of the most unruly did sprinkle a liquor, which shall be nameless, from the galleries upon the people below. And that's a euphemism, right? The wife of Josiah Langdon used to tell with great asperity of her being a sufferer by it. This good lady retained her resentment to an old age. The filthy creatures entirely spoiled a new velvet hood, which she had made for the occasion, and she could not wear it again. In the midst of this uproar, Mr. Thatcher was installed. The malcontents, says the writer, went off in a bad humor. They proceeded to the gathering of another church. In the plenitude of their zeal, they first thought of denominating it the Revenge Church of Christ. Tell me if you know of any churches with titles like that. But they thought better of it and called it the New Brick Church. However, the first name was retained for many years among the common people. Their zeal was great indeed. They descended into puerility. They placed the figure of a rooster as a vane upon the steeple out of derision of Mr. Thatcher, whose Christian name was Peter, taking advantage of a wind which turned the head of the rooster towards the New North Meeting House. When it was placed upon the spindle, a merry fellow straddled over it and crowed 3 times to complete the ceremony. The solemn, if not the sublime, and the ridiculous seem not unfrequently to have met together at ordinations in the olden time. I could not mention an ordination, says the Reverend Leonard Woods of Andover, in a letter written and published a few years since, that took place about 20 years ago, at which I myself was ashamed and grieved to see 2 aged ministers literally drunk, and a third indecently excited with strong drink. These disgusting and appalling facts I should wish might be concealed, but they were made public by the guilty persons, and I have thought it just and proper to mention them, in order to show how much we owe to a compassionate God for the great deliverance he has wrought. Legitimate occasion for a Te Deum, this most certainly.